of traffic because something happened today earlier on the tram. And delighted to see so many of you come out to this very peculiar topic, which is very important. It's on the base of every conflict and issues we have in the world. We would not be in such a world without these humanitarian organizations, human rights organizations. We live in a unique moment in history where actually these organizations have such a big space in the world. So thank you everybody who came. Beyond the Egeland, we have Danielle Haas from Israel. We have Yariv from Israel, previously worked for Amnesty International. From Nordic, and our amazing moderator, Hadi, Lile, Strømmen, who's done an amazing job investigating the topic, because it's a very complicated topic. And thank you so much. We believe in dialogue. We believe in sitting down together even if we don't agree with each other. We believe in hearing each other's lived experiences. And when we talk about lived experience, we talk about every lived experience. We talk about Erik's experience on the grounds in Gaza. We talk about
our crew from Tel Aviv, Israel, lived experience 2 years of this war and before, etc. So knock yourself out. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My name is Hadi Strømmen. I don't know if I've done an excellent job. Thank you very much, Louise. I've tried. I mean, just to clarify my position here, I don't have a position on these Gaza and Israel. I'm more or less extremely ignorant, I would say. I've tried as best as I can to learn these few days coming up to this event. I'm terrified. I'm not in my comfort zone at all. I'm a professor of law. I've been working with human rights and human rights organizations too for 20 years. So this is something that I know. I know about human rights. And partly about humanitarian work also, but it's not my main expertise. So anyway, I've asked Danielle to help me out with the topic of this panel and to introduce it. It is, human rights organization and partly also humanitarian organizations are part of what we call civil society. And in order for international law to function, there has to be a certain degree of shaming and blaming when it comes to states. When they commit human rights violations, when they do stuff that can be considered war crimes, and how do we call it, what do we call it? And there's been a debate about the role of NGOs, and especially in Gaza, because there are no journalists in Gaza. Of course, it's Israel who is banning all the journalists, so the role of NGOs have become very important to give a narrative, I think. But how do we understand that role of the human rights organizations and also other NGOs that do humanitarian work? And so to help me to introduce this, Danielle, can you explain why are we here? Why do we discuss these topics? Why human rights organizations and humanitarian organizations? Why should we discuss this in relation to Gaza?
Well,
sorry, maybe I didn't frame it exactly that you wanted.
I'll frame it as I am. No, I don't want it in any particular way. I'm just trying to make sense of it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for having me. My understanding, the question put to me was, why are we critical?
Why is there some criticism of human rights and humanitarian organizations in this time?
which sort of links to your question. I mean, I think if they're playing such an important role on the world stage, we must surely ask who they are and what they're about. So that's the position I'm going to take. You know, to talk about criticism of humanitarian and human rights organizations at this time is very difficult. I'm very aware of it because there is such antipathy in the world towards human rights writ large. So I don't take criticizing them lightly at all. I also come from within the human rights movement. I worked at Human Rights Watch for 14 years, both in New York and in Israel. So I'm very pro-human rights, but I do make a very important distinction that I think has been lost between human rights organizations, the institutions, the business of human rights, and humanitarian organizations, and their ideals. Just as we learned it was important to distinguish between the Catholic Church and faith. Institutions are not the same as their values, and if we blur them, we tend to overlook how they function in reality. So that's the position I'm coming from. I'm doing so feeling that the situation is getting worse in humanitarian and human rights organizations, and I say that based not on my own experience, but really on speaking now since October the 7th to literally dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of people, professionals within the human rights sector, working for all the main organizations you will have heard of, who talk about this utter collapse of their own organizations. So what they describe, and I'll say this as briefly as I can, are several key issues that really take it away from bias about Israel or Gaza, but really towards what are these organizations in the first place and how do they work? So a key underlying criticism that I've heard is that they have abandoned their core principles. So universality, neutrality. How is this manifested in organizations that claim these things, calling for marches for Palestine, arranging ceasefire marches?
Who has been calling for that?
Within major organizations, Greenpeace, Médecins Sans Frontières, Amnesty, these kind of organizations, while rejecting protests for hostages on the grounds that it could be seen to be pro-Israel. It's manifested by campaigns for the Nigerian schoolgirls kidnapped by Boko Haram, but not for the hostages kidnapped by Hamas. It's manifested by some reports on some issues, but Amnesty to this day, for example, not issuing its October 7th report because internal emails show they're afraid it will actually conjure support for and sympathy for Israel. So that's the first one. Secondly of all, the criticism is that these are becoming increasingly dogmatic institutions where discussion is no longer tolerated. I saw this firsthand, where if you have a different point of view or you challenge the norm, you are considered to be outside the scope of trust. I've heard of people being removed from emails, removed from meetings, and of course Amnesty Israel was in fact suspended for questioning a genocide report. Excuses were given, but it was very closely tied. Number three, I think we're here, and because of the declining standards, methodological standards I've heard about and I've seen personally within human rights and humanitarian organizations. This involves no consistent fact-checking. I myself was in the program office, the last line of editing. 95% of reports that went out the door were not fully fact-checked by this division at all, though they should have been, because the people responsible had other roles and frequently said they were too busy. This is just the reality. There's no consistent corrections policy applied. Their evidentiary, or the standard, is far below that in academia. There is no consistent peer review, for example. Number four, we are here because of an internal culture that is making it impossible for people in their own organizations to speak out, because of vicious internal dialogue that is going far beyond professional conduct, far beyond legitimate criticism of Israel, to ad hominem attacks on other staff, I have many examples. I've seen countless messages within internal systems, and we are here because the managers of these organizations seem to be not at all interested. They have turned a blind eye to documentation presented before them. They have dismissed them, minimized them. One person was told their response was tribal in basis. And one person who took medical leave with a doctor's note because of the antipathy shown and the toxicity in the organization was told to have a good break. Number 5, they've become too powerful, too omnipotent, too arrogant, and too without oversight. These organizations are some of the least regulated in modern life. Aviation has the FAA. The press, is ruled by various council. These organizations are primarily self-governing, committed to standards and principles and other things that are actually not implemented. And while they say, and I really invite you to question, when people say human rights organizations have methodological rigor and they stand by their methodology, I invite you to ask them to prove it. Because while there are standards and there are policies on the ground, they are often not implemented and they are never asked to prove what they say. Last point, number 6, the criticism has been that they are quite simply full of rank hypocrisy, that they ask others to do what they do not do, that they demand accountability, but they are not accountable, that they demand transparency, but they are not transparent, that they celebrate whistleblowers, except when the whistle is blown on them, when they condemn Gulf states, but court Gulf states for money. Mercy Corps was recently off on a trip to conjure money from Qatar and the UAE. And they call for term limits and condemn those who extend them, but they themselves have leadership that have no term limits. Ken Roth was in his position at Human Rights Watch for 29 years, which is longer than the average dictator. So why are we here? Because it's important. Human rights are important. We're coming at a time, this is a time of great darkness, great illiberalism, great authoritarianism, and yet the organizations most tasked with defending this are not really fit for purpose. And what's more, they have become breeding grounds for ideology and activism. So final point, the methodology of Human Rights Watch and other organizations like it is to interview people, to triangulate that evidence and say, do we have a pattern here of abuse? By its own evidentiary standards, based on speaking to dozens of people, seeing the evidence, we have a profound pattern of abuse within these organizations in terms of their own standards and their failed methodology. And to me, the question is not, is there a problem, but really, why are these organizations not talking about it, acknowledging it, and what do they plan to do about it?
Thank you very much. Yariv, you have come from Israel. You were part of the amnesty office that was closed down. For how many years?
I worked there for 5 years.
For 5 years, yeah. This has been, the closing of that amnesty office was a central part of the, wasn't my phone, of this, maybe unleashed some of this debate. What can you say about what happened? And do you agree with
Danielle?
Yeah.
I have a slightly different take on this. I think, from the outset, I would say that human rights organizations has to be biased. They has to be biased in favor of the oppressed, the weak, the victims, but they have to care about all victims. And power imbalances considerations are a legitimate part of the picture, but they are not the whole picture. And if it comes to the extent that you can see only oppressor and oppressed, to the extent that atrocities happen to civilians, associated with the oppressor, are being downplayed, not ignored, but virtually almost ignored. So we have a problem, and I think it's a deviation from humanism and universalism.
You both talked about universalism. What do you mean with universalism?
It means that you apply the standard of human rights to every human being. Mm-hmm. And if you see power imbalances, so you care more about the oppressed. Mm-hmm. And it makes sense. So there is a tension between these two principles. It's even philosophical. And I think the two principles are important. And we need to think how to bring them together or to balance between them. But we see now that the cultural landscape is leaning toward the so-called woke culture and the young radicals who can only see oppressed and oppressor. They cannot see the situation as emerging from a dynamic of a feedback loop.
Who can see that? It's the
tat.
organizations.
And it's the young crowd, but the organizations would, to some extent, would align themselves with the young crowds. They want to mobilize them, they want to recruit them, and they are very sensitive to criticism from this young crowd.
Are you talking about Amnesty now, or who?
No, it's all the same. I think it's all or most of the NGOs. I think Amnesty, for example, when they effectively kicked us out of the movement, from outside it would look like a nuance. Because what we said about the genocide report, we haven't said we dispute the finding. We haven't said we dispute the horrible atrocities that Israel inflicts in Gaza. We think it's really shameful. And we supported effective pressure on Israel, actually even before October 7 took place, from a universal perspective, because I think every country that does large-scale human rights violations should face international pressure. Human rights violations are not internal affairs. It's not the business of the country, it's the business of the global community. And Israel is no exception. But then again, we thought that the interpretation of the findings, like you need to establish the accusation of genocide, you need to demonstrate that there is no other reasonable interpretation other than top-down intent from the state leaders to destroy the group in all or in part. And we said, listen, there is another alternative interpretation, which is the blatant disregard for Palestinians' life, which is still horrible, but it's different than wanting to destroy them. You just don't care that when you go about to destroy Hamas, you will also hurt many civilians. This is another explanation.
But it's a horrible thing. I mean, it's what's happening to the Palestinians. You can't compare what's happening to the Israelis to what's happening to people in Gaza. I mean, the discrepancy is just huge.
Absolutely. And I think this is where we fall, because that's why I don't love the bias debate so much. It's not so much about international or human rights organizations caring more about the Palestinians or showing the Palestinians suffering more. It's more about them not understanding the feedback loop that perpetuate this conflict and suffering. Because if you call about a month or so after the war started to end the war, which we support, but you're not adding to this another layer of suggesting a framework, a mechanism to maintain security and stability. So what happens? One of Hamas leaders promised to remake October 7 style attack on Israel, and imagine the war ends, another October 7th like massacre is taking place, even in a smaller scale. The retaliation towards Palestinians would be 10 times more.
Yeah, but
so the Palestinians would pay.
Well, couldn't you compare it to a slave uproaring? I mean, if you're heavily oppressed, you just want to do something.
I agree. Yeah. I agree. And this is the task of the international community to activate, to inflict effective pressure way before even October 7, but not a pressure in terms of we hate Israel, we don't want it to exist or whatever, we're just boycotting you. Yeah. We need to have a concrete demands that take into account the Palestinian just needs for liberation and equality and freedom, but also the Israelis' need for security. And you cannot reduce Israel's security threat to just a derivative of the oppression of Palestinians. I do believe that most of Israel's security risks stem from its oppression against the Palestinians. But it's not that if you eliminate Israeli oppression today, so tomorrow there are no security risks. De-radicalization is a very bumpy process with ups and downs. So ending the oppression of Palestinians is one thing, but avoiding the cycle, the vicious cycle of security threats.
I just want to bring in Jan Egeland. You have been working in this region since you were in the 20s, you told me, and you have been involved in humanitarian and also human rights organizations for I mean, almost as long as I have been living. I think you're one of the big shots. And here people are challenging the business that you have been involved in. What's your comment?
Well, my first comment is I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad for the opportunity to discuss. And I think you are bringing very important perspectives. We need to listen to them, and I hope it is pity that Human Rights Watch and Amnesty and so on is not here.
Yeah.
I'm here now as the head of Norwegian Refugee Council, and we're a different organization. But a couple of...
You said it was a bit unclear, the last thing. We are...
I'm the Secretary General of the Norwegian Refugee Council, worldwide human rights, humanitarian organization, 14,000 field workers, helps 10 million refugees with very concrete relief. We're also in Gaza, and we're in the West Bank. I mean, I think, it's an important debate. And I mean, number one, is there too much attention to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and its consequences compared to other problems in the world? And I would say yes. I mean, I met my friend Erwin Kuhn here as we were waiting to get in, and he asked me, what's your main concern? My main concern now is Sudan. I mean, where 20 million lives are at stake at the moment, and we are helping people who are coming out for Al-Fasher, which was besieged, and people were massacred, and so on. Very little attention to that.
But it doesn't lessen the suffering of the Palestinians. It doesn't lessen. The suffering of Palestinians doesn't become less because.
But it's my point is many say that too much attention to that compared to other issues.
Okay.
I would agree. Yeah. Number two, is it too polarized? It's too polarized. I mean, it's incredible because you have like two camps, and whatever you say that Israel is doing, it's criticized. Why are you saying that? Are you anti-Israel? Are you anti-Semitic and so on? No, I'm saying what I see. Talking about 7th of October. Are you against Palestinian liberation? Don't you understand the occupation? No, it was a massacre. It was terror. Civilians were killed in the hundreds. More than 800 civilians were killed. 1,200 people were killed altogether. 38 children, 3 of them under 3 years old, 250 or 300 hostages moved to Hamas. I spoke on it repeatedly on Al Jazeera Arabic because that's the way to get the message to Hamas. We're equally concerned with the atrocities on either side, and I'm very saddened to see the polarization around this of last couple of years. You start to speak about this conflict, and people go through the roof. It must be possible to have
So who are these
a
people?
discussion.
Are you, when you talk about these people, who are they? Are they internal in the organizations, or
No, I'm talking
people in general?
Actually, I don't recognize at all what you describe. You think was there in Human Rights Watch and maybe in Amnesty and others. We agreed on calling terror after the 7th of October, calling for the release of the hostages, calling out the killing of the disproportionate warfare in Gaza. I mean, I've been there 2 times. I crisscrossed the place. My colleagues have been most of them are female aid workers, mothers with families. They had to flee 10, 12, 14 times as their homes have been bombed. They have been displaced back and forth within a stretch of land where there is no escape.
Yeah.
I mean, so
yeah, but then,
these are realities.
Because is it possible to talk about the issue of Hamas being, partly to blame, to hide, because they hide behind the civilians? Isn't that what they are saying? The Israeli government is saying, the military is saying that we what are we supposed to do? How is the Israeli military supposed to defend their country against the attacks of Hamas? If we can talk about it as a defense, I don't know if that's also a question.
Yeah, but the whole point is this was not a targeted anti-terror campaign. Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan or IS in Iraq or whatever. This was destruction of entire cities. I mean, Erik, Fosse and I, we've been there. We've been crisscrossing the place. The Hamas is a terrible organization. Yes, they blend into the civilian population. Yes, they had tunnels all over the place. They brought hostages into the tunnels. They never recognized Israel's right to exist. They were always on a war footing with Israel, and they were fighting each other, as you know, again and again over the time. Still, so I was surprised that Israel's eyes was on trying to harass the Palestinian administration in the West Bank, mostly. That's, I mean, the old criticism of why they were not prepared on the 7th of October, and not avoiding Hamas attack, because they were a militant organization. They had done terror before many times. My organization, NRC, was closed down by Hamas in 2015 because we refused pressure from Hamas to work like this and hire these people and all sorts of interference. We said, not at all. Okay. They invaded our offices, and we had a standoff for 3-4 weeks, and then they yielded and said, okay, work like you do everywhere else. We will not interfere anymore. It's a terrible organization.
It's a good place to bring in Erik Fosse. I mean, you are a professor of medicine, and you have this organization which have been working in Gaza for I don't know how many years, but a long time. And you are one of the few organizations which are there, and you are talking to the Hamas, and you are talking to the Israeli military. And how did you actually cozy up with Hamas?
First, I've been actually I founded Nordic in 1983, and we've been working in Palestine and several other countries also. But I worked and traveled to Palestine and Gaza and the West Bank since then. And first of all, it's not the responsibility of the human rights or humanitarian organizations of the world to solve the situation and create a peace between Israel and the Palestinians. That's their responsibility. Yeah. On the West Bank, Gaza, and in Israel, there lives about 16 million people. Some are Christians, some are Muslims, and some are Jews. And I think they together have to find a way to to live peacefully together, so they can all prosper. For some reason now, for decades, there has been increasing polarization. And I have to be frank. I mean, Israel is the strong part in this. This is a very asymmetric part. So there is not a coincidence that we have to talk and present the situation of the Palestinians in this conflict. That doesn't mean that, for example, I think that all Israelis deserve to prosper and live safe and peacefully. I've been working in different wars in Lebanon and in Gaza, and of course, when we work in these areas, we are very concerned that the parties follow the international laws, the laws of war, the laws of human rights, and particularly the Geneva Conventions that protect civilians and healthcare workers and health facilities during wartime.
But what if they don't, and how do you know if they do or not?
Well, that's easy. If you bomb a hospital, it's a breach of the Geneva Conventions. If you kill healthcare workers, ambulance drivers, that's a breach of the Geneva Conventions. Then you can explain...
If it's a military target, then how...
They are not military targets.
But they are what they are saying that it is. I mean, they are hiding weapons.
But the motive doesn't, in a way, justify the means. This is the problem. If Hamas hides in a hospital, which of course we working there, I've been trying to investigate this year after year because of course we know they shouldn't be there. We don't want armed people in the hospital. I've never seen armed people in the hospitals. That doesn't
Maybe
mean
they hide the arms.
They can hide, yes, but if they do that, they breach international law. You are not allowed to enter a hospital with arms and hide among civilians. But that doesn't justify the other part to kill everybody in that hospital because there are they allegedly are soldiers there. So that's what I say. There are it's the actions that are important for international law and not the motives. It's not... Well, I'm talking to Hamas people about the leaders, about the attack on Israel on the 7th of October. And they say, well, this is justified because, according to UN, it's unlivable in Gaza. When I visited Gaza before this war, the last time was in 2022, they had electricity twice, 2 hours every day. For 24 hours. The lack of power led to complete collapse of the sewage system, the access to clean water, running of hospitals. And according to the UN, it was in 2020 unlivable, according to their standards.
According to the Hamas standards?
No, UN standards.
The UN, okay.
And then what Hamas said, this is justified because, and also they talked about the Israeli policy on the West Bank and the settlers on the West Bank. So they justified this. And of course, what I say, this is, you cannot justify kidnapping civilians and you cannot justify killing civilians. That's not, that's a clear breach of international law to do this. So, and in a way, what we hear now is what Israel use every time they attack a hospital or kill healthcare workers. It's the same, in a way, excuse that these are Hamas are hiding in the ambulance, they're hiding here and there, but they don't have to prove it. I think if you live in a legal society, you have to prove things.
Why do you think they kill them? Is it because they lie? About Hamas hiding.
It's very difficult to understand this. They have attacked all the hospitals, in all hospitals, 36 hospitals in Gaza have been under attack. Several of my colleagues have been arrested, brought to Israeli prisons, and then released after a number of months.
But Erik, when I talked to you about before this debate, I mean, your position was basically, I am a humanitarian worker. I'm a medical professional. I don't have any political opinion on this issue. But you have an opinion on these issues.
Yes, but I don't have any solutions. I think they have the people, as I said, I think the people living there in this region, they have to solve this themselves. And I think it's very sad to see this polarized situation, to see the increased settlements on the West Bank. I don't think this is actually a way to open for mutual trust and dialogue, which is absolutely necessary, in my opinion, for people to live together. Because we talk about a lot of people.
Yeah, we should, I mean, you also said that you wish that everybody was just become friends. And
yeah. No, that's difficult in this situation. Yeah. That we start respecting each other and the rights of each human being. Yeah. To prosper and to live a safe and prosperous life.
So okay, fine. Now you can, if you now everybody had a chance to talk. So now we can proceed. Also, you can just raise your hand. So please.
I just want to pick up on a few things. Jan, you said that you're very categorical after October the 7th in condemning it, which I applaud, but many organizations were not. And I think you have to recognize that. I came from an organization that did not issue a categorical condemnation of October the 7th. So did Yariv. When you say you wish Human Rights Watch and Amnesty were here, well, I was Human Rights Watch and he was Amnesty. And when you say you don't recognize what I'm describing, I think there are a few things going on. Number one, that you're in a position of great leadership. I'm closer to the ground. I always was. I worked within the program office, the manager of managers, but I also, most of my interaction was with the ordinary rank and file. Also, I have spoken to, and I really think I'm probably the person who's spoken to the most humanitarian and human rights workers in organizations across the world at this point, and this is what they are saying is happening in their own organizations. So I really beg you not to dismiss what people are saying, because I think it's a very big blind spot of human rights organizations not to acknowledge what's going on inside them.
You were talking to Jan?
Yeah.
Yeah, you should. Please respond.
Listen, I can speak for my organization. We have 14,000 people. I think we lost some who felt when I called it, it's a terror, what's happened on the 7th of October. It's inexcusable. Has nothing to do with an uprising against occupation or a liberation struggle to kill women, children, farmers, people at the youth camp. I think we lost some. Never have we lost anyone because of documenting what's happening in Gaza. And I think the majority of the organizations are internally quite united around describing what's happening in Gaza, what they see, and what it is. You stayed for some reason for 14 years then. Why did you stay 14 years under the dictator Ken Roth then?
But you're misrepresenting what I'm saying. I mean, I never said he was a dictator, and I want to
longer than the despots, you said.
I said his term limit was longer than the average, which is true. And this is the kind of misrepresentation I really want to get away from. I'm making a very clear, factual-based argument that when you call for term limits, but your own term limit is so long, you're guilty of hypocrisy. I want to make very clear that I have nothing to say about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict on this stage. I'm not interested in who was right and who is wrong. I'm talking about, and this is why I am here at least, I'm talking about the credibility of these organizations. And I don't want to get diverted. I came here with a very specific mission because there are so many people who cannot speak out in their own organizations at this time. And I just also want to make clear, I want to reference something that Erik said about never having seen Hamas in hospitals. I have spoken to dozens and dozens of people, including from MSF, including from the Red Cross.
What is MSF?
Doctors Without Borders, who say and have said and would go on the record saying, if they only had a safe space to do it, that of course they know they're working alongside militants. You get off on the 7th floor, not the 8th floor. You turn right, you don't turn left. maybe you didn't see them, but there are people who have discussed this in meetings, and it has been noted.
Yeah, okay, fine. But what if there is?
So what I'm saying
What
is...
if there
well,
is? But is it a military target?
I'm not... I want to be clear. I'm not getting into the politics of whether Israel has the right to bomb something.
Yeah.
Of course, that there is huge suffering going on in the ground. I'm talking, and I want to be very specific about this because it is a needle, a very fine needle, but a very important needle. I'm talking about the credibility of organizations that claim to say anything at this point. They must be examined as credible sources and questioned where they're not. And this is a great oversight that goes on, and I understand how much human rights organizations are respected in Norway in particular, and I would just caution you that the bigger the idol, the bigger the institution, often the greater the level in which you must investigate them, because they grow corrupt from within. This is not a new concept. Final thought, George Orwell, well, he talked about this with Animal Farm in his final sentence when he said, the people from the outside, I paraphrase, look from pig to man and man to pig, and they couldn't tell which was which. In many respects, these organizations have become closer to the entities they criticize in their lack of transparency and their lack of accountability than they want to acknowledge.
Okay, fine. Jan, and then Erik, and then Yariv.
Well, they become corrupt from within. That is humbly not my impression at all from these organizations, who are very hard-working people like yourselves, I'm sure was, when you were inside for 14 years until 2023. But I would say if you actually have found that there was not a real discussion and opening for that internally on the line, say, on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which is so contentious, that's a weakness in the organization. Of course one should discuss. In my organization, we encourage in all staff meetings to discuss this. Many people have tried to get me to call it genocide and apartheid. I have never done that. It's not a role of us as a humanitarian organization to determine that. We don't have the expertise to do that. Okay. So we're debating it. Of course we will have open debate. That's my impression also from other organizations. I can guarantee we have it in my organization.
Just one final thought. Jan, you were in the organization many years ago. There's been a great deal of change within these organizations in the past decade. An immense amount of activism, an immense amount of ideology has come in the past decade. So it could be that your experience is entirely valid, and so is mine.
Okay, fine.
Could be.
Erik, did you have...
Okay.
No, I think he asked for the word before me.
You were like... yeah, okay, fine.
Never mind.
Yariv, please.
Gentlemen.
So I want to do a weird move and to take us back to the title of this whole event, which is about effectiveness.
Yeah.
And I want to say, for example, when you talk about Israel's fire policy in Gaza, which was totally devastating, hospitals and the so-called safe zones, which were bombs.
Fire policy.
Sorry? Fire policy, the bombing policy, right?
So they had a policy of...
several policies or code of conduct or just pattern of conduct. Mm-hmm. So you could see, so-called safe zones are being bombed times and again and these sort of things. And I'm saying that to a certain extent, the fact that, Michael Volcher, the philosopher of ethics of war, he was saying that when everything is prohibited, everything is allowed, meaning that when you have so many prohibitions, so many things that you cannot do, so you don't care about this code of conduct anymore because it's not feasible. You don't know what the challenges of urban warfare are. You don't know what it takes to actually pursue a legitimate military cause, and you restrict us so much, so we just don't care about this kind of
because
product.
this is an important issue for you, the issue of security, and you're saying basically that human rights organizations and also humanitarian organizations, they are not in a position.
I want to make an example, so it will be very concrete. I'm not talking in abstract. For example, the pagers attack which was the attack attributed to the Mossad, the Israeli Mossad in Lebanon, which was, instilling explosive devices within the pages, within these communication devices of high-ranked Hezbollah militant.
Yeah, to attack the Hezbollah
Right,
soldier.
and they explode. And then Amnesty issued an analysis which condemned this attack and saying, well, they cannot say disproportionate because it was mainly hurting militants. So they say booby traps are not allowed according to military, international humanitarian law. There are only two problems with these convictions. One, it wasn't booby traps. Booby traps, by definition, are enacted by the victim. And here, the operator, was the Mossad, was the attacker. And two, booby traps are not prohibited by international law. It is only booby traps that can be despised as, if you take a toy for a child and make it explosive device and a child can take this and get hurt, this is what is prohibited. Yeah. So this is a case of you're so restrictive that nobody takes you seriously in the world of the establishment. You get praised in the street, in the grassroots, in the radicals, but where policy that can change things on the ground.
Why did they do this? Do you think it's because they felt a pressure to criticize Israel because it's Israel, and they wouldn't have criticized another government or a military that used the same strategy?
The short question is, I don't know why they do it, but I can speculate. I think it's not a matter of Israel-Palestine alone. I think all over the world, human rights organizations are becoming very suspicious toward national security considerations because oftentimes, on the pretext of national security, states, and Israel does it a lot, they promote oppression, they promote surveillance, they promote all sorts of human rights violations, which is true. But then again, security risks are also true. It's true in Israel, but it's also true in Norway, in Europe, in whatever you look. So being, developing these allergies, so to speak, to national security, I think it's one explanation.
Erik, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Yes, I think actually it was very good that he spoke before me, because then we can talk a little bit about the challenges of urban warfare. Yeah. Because the Geneva Conventions are probably made for more regular warfare, where actually a soldier becomes a civilian once he's injured, and he lays away his weapon, then he's protected. In Gaza, you have the situation where Israel is going after Hamas. Yeah. Hamas got 46% on the last election, which was in 2006, so it's a long time ago. But according to Israeli officials, Hamas is in the heart of most Palestinians. Yeah. And at least many of them, not all. I know a lot of people who are not very fond of Hamas. But the problem is that if you are creating a warfare in a very densely populated area, 2.3 million people in an area which is about 2/3 of Oslo, the city of Oslo. That's the area. Yeah. So it's a very densely populated area. You have a real problem if you are going only after the military people, the armed people. And also, Israel is not only going after military people, they go after politicians, leaders who are not combatants, because they're going to strike out Hamas. And I think that many of the staff, for example, if you look, Hamas has had the civilian control of the Gaza society since 2006. They have been responsible for all the hospitals, the police force, all the civilian society. And of course, all the leaders in these institutions are hired by Hamas. That doesn't mean that they are strong followers. But it seems to me that since they live in this context, they are considered targets. And that's far beyond what international law allows. And I think this is one of the huge issues here, because that means that the Geneva Conventions dealing with armed soldiers, armed combatants, doesn't really apply for a situation we see in Gaza. There it seems it's the organizations, sympathizers, people working in the civil society that are targeted and are also mentioned as the reason for attacks.
Well, okay, let me just, because I want to just comment a little bit on this issue, because you're getting into a topic that I think is important. And that I know a little bit about, because so it's a good thing that I know a little bit about law and about human rights. And also humanitarian law. International law, including human rights law and humanitarian law, is very vague norms. They are formulated in treaties, which are agreements between states. There are certain rules on how to interpret treaties. It follows from the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, and there are these articles on that. But in general, you would see that some countries, for instance, in Germany, they have something called a constitutional court. And then they have the other courts. Because if you're going to interpret the Constitution, it becomes very political. Because the Constitution is vague and it's difficult to change, just like international law on humanitarian law and human rights. So you have, when something is difficult to interpret, or there is a lot of room for different interpretations, and it's difficult to change the text, it gives a lot of power to those who interpreted it. And of course, when you are mentioning, yeah, this is a violation of the Geneva Convention, but Israel says otherwise. And who are you to know? Who are these? Who is supposed to settle it? Isn't that there is no?
No,
you're not a court. What's your role?
I'm not calling for a court or saying that they should be condemned for this. I just say that that's what we are observing in Gaza.
Yeah, but are you observing a breach of the Geneva Convention, or are you observing what you call facts that you interpret as?
We see this in wartime. Hospitals are generally should be protected. That's what every nation has agreed on, including Israel.
Yeah.
Then what is a combatant when you are fighting an organization? If you are going after political leaders, you're going to destroy them on all levels. They are not all combatants. They may be family members.
Okay.
And then I'm a doctor. I'm trying to save civilian lives. And I think these laws are there to protect the civilians. That's why these agreements were made. And what we have seen in Gaza, I mean, there are so many civilians and children being killed and injured, and I treated them myself. I've seen this. I know it. And it shouldn't be necessary.
Well,
so that's then it's about the means you are selecting when you are in this position. Where you have a society, very densely populated area, you want to attack a political opponent and a military opponent. Of course, that's a huge problem. But to destroy almost every building, attack hospitals, kill a lot of civilians, that's far beyond what I've seen anywhere else.
We had a talk. When we talked together, you said, we talked about the question of famine. And then you said, I don't have an opinion on famine, because that's a legal question, you said, but I can see people starving. So why do you have a different position when it comes to the hospitals?
I don't think that's a different position. I see that a lot of civilians are being killed and that a lot of hospitals are being attacked. And this is a huge problem. You know, this is not only Israel. We see this in Ukraine. We see it in all over the world, that actually these international conventions are no longer respected in most wars. I think we see the same in Sudan.
I have to bring in Jan, and then...
Yeah, I think, listen, there is no doubt that Hamas has broken all the rules in the book. Lots of war crimes, including the one that they have blended into the civilian population. Some of them have been at schools. Some of them have been at hospitals or been in the vicinity. It's a fact. There's also a fact that it's been, the Israel has violated 3 principles in international law. I mean, it's not disputed, Hadi. There has to be precaution.
Yeah.
There has to be distinction, and there has to be proportionality.
Yeah.
So when
but isn't all those issues...
when the World Health Organization have documented 720 attacks on healthcare in Gaza, with at least 1,580 health workers killed, it's a tremendous figure. 565 aid workers have been killed. There has been 403 out of 564 school buildings have been directly hit and sustained damage. I've seen many of them. It is disproportional. It's not so. If it is, if it's very condemnable that Russia is hitting hospitals in Ukraine, as they are, every time they argue, no, there were Ukrainian forces nearby, passing by, going through.
Yeah, but maybe they were
Assad
right.
did the same, argued the same in Syria for every hospital they bombed.
Yeah.
They were also very wrong. And one additional point, if I may, Hadi.
But Danielle has also asked for the word, and Yariv, so... Yeah.
Okay, but maybe we could also come into the one...
Is it a different point, or do you want... I think Danielle wants to...
It may be a different point, so I yield, and please.
Okay.
So just to go back to my little drama of credibility, it interests me, all the statements that you made, Erik. It goes to the power of these organizations to speak and to be heard. They're having an enormous influence in this conflict, and I absolutely respect your role as a doctor. The complexity I see is when comments stray beyond specific roles. You talked about the Geneva Conventions, you talked about international law, and so I think this is where it gets confusing to people on the outside, because you have a particular role as a doctor, and yet there are other elements being brought in which are of a more political nature. And I think this happens a lot with human rights and humanitarian organizations, that they claim to have a particular very narrow thing, but there's a lot of bleeding and strain into other areas that isn't really that obvious to the naked eye. And I would just say, in terms of the reference to school buildings, this is the kind of, from a methodological point of view, something I think really needs tightening. Absolutely, Israel has bombed schools. Absolutely, schools have been used as bases for attacks. So I am not against whitewashing anything. I'm just saying the overall picture is incredibly important in the context of this discussion. And to highlight one thing without the other is bias by omission, is inaccuracy by omission. And that's been a big feature of how this conflict has been discussed from within and by these organizations.
Yariv.
And I actually want to take on that, again, to the issue of effectiveness. So, my take is to say that, my take is to say that, you know, when you are conceived of as, you know, biased or uncritical of Hamas and all these sort of things, it's not only an ethical problem. It also hurts or damage your ability to bring about the change you want to achieve. I mean, if you want to change things on the ground, and I think we all agree that Israel made many blatant human rights violations in this war. I would even say that blocking the humanitarian aid was a genocidal act, so I'm not shying away from criticizing Israel in the hardest word. But if we agree that this is horrible and we need to change that, not just to say, oh, it's wrong, right? Not just mere rhetorics. So we need to establish the widest coalition possible. So we need to include the establishment, we need to persuade governments, we need to persuade progressive or liberal Jews in North America, which has quite a bit political strength. I'm sorry if it sounds anti-Semitic. They're not controlling the media, but they do have some strength. And it's a problem, because if you put restrictions on Israel, which is so unreasonable, which will not enable it to pursue a legitimate military objection, so other countries will say, hey, I don't want that as a precedent, because next thing I will have to deal with terrorism, and I would be restricted by this unreasonable, code of conduct. Yeah. So they are shying away from working with this too radical, too detached from practical challenges of war kind of stand.
What you're saying is that if Israel is criticized on issues that they shouldn't be criticized on, they lose credibility when it comes to the issues of,
And states are
we were talking
afraid
about
to be restricted
hospitals.
so much.
Yeah. Jan.
Can I do my other point now then?
Is there anybody else who wants to, or do we allow him to?
I think.
No, please.
Just basically on this issue, I think it's pretty clear. I've been to Gaza twice. I was in contact with my people in Gaza today again. We have 270 people there. Erik Fosse has been working there for weeks and months. Yeah. It's a lot. Yeah. A lot of violations of humanitarian law, and one of them was we, NRC, have been blocked from bringing in tents, tarpaulins, water and sanitation equipment, food since March. Of late, United Arab Emirates, Turkey, Egypt, etc., have been able to bring in a lot, but there were months when the population was starved, and Yoav Gallant said, on day 2 or 3 after the horrible terror by Hamas inside Israel, there will be no food, no water, no nothing going to that population. Many people in the Knesset, many ministers said the population brought it on themselves because they supported Hamas, which had a secretive operation. I mean, not even the Mossad knew what were coming. How could the entire population in Gaza be behind the terror? It was a terror operation by men within the brigade in Hamas. So comes to my point, which I think should, in my view, possibly concern the Kaos, the Nordic Jewish network, that I've seen in my many years as a friend of Israel change. Hamas was also a terror organization. Israel changed. And the government changed. A fact, again. I just wanted to.
You mean the policies have changed? Or what do you mean with change?
Yeah, the people who are in power. Yeah. A minister called Itamar Ben-Gvir was worshipping Baruch Goldstein, who was one of the foremost terrorists that shot the Oslo Accord to pieces by killing people in prayer in Hebron. Way back, he had a poster in his room, and he said, "Oh, it was a youth thing." Well, I think he was more than 30 years old when he took down the poster of the terrorist. Smotrich, finance minister, and he is the Minister of Interior, for heaven's sake. He is responsible for police behavior, etc. He was applauding human rights violations. And just one more point.
Yeah, but these are just statements from politicians, isn't it?
No, I'm just saying he was applauding human rights violations, and he was applauding terror. Yeah. And the IDF documented, the Israeli Defense Forces, not Human Rights Watch or NRC, documented 704 settler attacks in 2025 until October in the West Bank. 704 attacks against women, children, grandmothers, etc., Bedouins. And they say the security official attributed the trend, I'm quoting from Haaretz, fantastic Israeli paper, by the way, attributed the trend to the political backing of settler movements from government ministers, Knesset members, and prominent religious leaders in the national religious political camp. Friends of Israel should really be concerned by how Israel has changed.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. Israel has changed. It's become, the people in power are abhorrent in many ways. But if I get back to how human rights organizations deal with it, I have, I guess, a question for you. I mean, the degree to which, just because you don't like a government, whether that means you don't engage with it. The position of Human Rights Watch became to circumvent the Israeli government, to not interact with it anymore, pretty much. I heard that discussed in meetings, and to create narrative change about Israel in the public sphere. I questioned whether that was the correct role for an advocacy organization to be engaged in actively changing the way people talk and think about Israel, to the extent they even partnered with the Hollywood agency in 2023 to insert messaging into that. And what your thought is about the fact that there was no Jewish Israeli staff member on the ground as long as I was there, whether that reflects the correct position for an organization seeking to really change it, as I seek to change Israel, by being active within it rather than standing outside it. And whether you think a BDS activist is the right person for the job of managing and overseeing Israel work, as has been the case at Human Rights Watch for many years.
BDS,
a former BDS activist.
What is a BDS?
A former
boycott neighbors and sanction Israelis.
My question is not whether these people have a role to play in the organization, but whether, if you really care to engage with Israel and to change this abhorrent direction that is going in, whether this is the right way to do it.
Okay, yeah.
That's a very interesting question.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, you will get an answer. Number one, I've tried repeatedly to meet with this Israeli government. I tried again now, coming back. They say they will not meet with me or any of the other humanitarian international organizations that have documented abuse of the laws of war in Gaza or before. When, and it pains me. Listen, my brother was a volunteer in 1967 at the kibbutz, just after the war. I studied at the Hebrew University at Mount Scopus when I was 26. I knew Rabin and Peres, Yitzhak Rabin, Shimon Peres, personally. Rabin, hero for Israel and its defense. And I have devoted a lot of time to promote the security of Israel through our peace work, and to secure the recognition from PLO, who treated Israel as an entity they would like to eliminate, as Israel treated them as terrorists. We never succeed with Hamas, we succeed with PLO. And to now be told by the Israeli government that my organization and many others will lose all registration in Israel, possibly this week, so we will not be able to work at all. I mean, it's extreme. Iran is not even doing that. Not even, I mean, the Houthis are very close to actually to doing that. So I'm back a little bit to, as friends of Israel, we need to avoid that that those extremists, of which there are many now in the government, really makes Israel become an outcast. I mean, to Schumer, the Jewish, the head of the Democrats in Senate, he's making Israel a pariah country. I didn't say that. He said so. Yeah. I mean, I think it should
we get the point.
Us as friends of Israel.
Yariv.
Yeah, it wasn't quite what I said. I appreciate the role you played. I believe you. But I'm telling you that other people and organizations have not behaved in a similar way.
Okay.
Again, I just repeat what I said, that there's been a disengagement for many years prior to Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. Although the direction of the government was already very right, again, do you not engage with the government? Do you engage in narrative change about a country? And is that the role of an advocacy organization? And should a BDS activist be in charge of Israel work? That was my specific point. But I totally take on board what you say.
Our staff in Jerusalem are mixed Israeli Jews, Palestinian Israelis, Armenians. I mean, that's
right.
That's
Human Rights Watch has had no Jewish Israeli in place for years. So I'm just saying, you're speaking from your organizational point of view. I'm just trying to be more general about the approach of these groups.
I want to add to this, and I think every bad word you would say about the Israeli government, I would add 2 or 3 more. It's horrible, no question about it. I'm thinking from a human rights perspective. I'm not talking about politics now. But you have mentioned, rightly so, this horrible mindset that is very prevalent among Israelis currently, or since October 7, which is that all Gazans, or vast majority of Gazans, are supposedly Hamas supporters. And this is very devastating mindset, not only because it's wrong, factually wrong, but because it's justified. Not only because
I was saying
that most Israelis think that most of Gazans are Hamas supporters.
No, some said that, yes. Not the Israelis, most Israelis do not believe that.
Statistics.
Yeah. Okay. They do, okay.
Unfortunately, 70% or so of Jewish Israelis think it's true. And it's horrible, it breaks my heart. It's really horrible. And I think, it's also justifying the horrible conduct in Gaza. So back then, when there was still Amnesty Israel, we wanted to struggle against this mindset. So we had an idea to republish a great report by an organization called Amnesty International, dating a few years before October 7, which was about Hamas crackdown on internal protest in Gaza by Gazans. It was not related to Israel, it was about social affairs. And Hamas crackdown was very brutal. It was involving torture, ill treatment, and so on. So we wanted to demonstrate to the Israeli public that there are Gazans who try to protest against Hamas, and they are quiet because they were killed, tortured, etc. And what happened? I brought the idea personally to one senior in Amnesty International, and she was alarmed. She said, "Don't do that. No. It will benefit the Israeli narrative." And I was left wondering, what exactly would it benefit? The idea that Hamas is a brutal organization?
That's a great attitude. I agree.
So this is what we deal here. I mean, ideally, you're so right, but we deal here not all of the stuff. Many good people in Amnesty, but many are trying to form a black and white narrative that is so counterproductive to the human rights of Palestinians.
I agree.
And this is horrible. And I think the vast majority in Amnesty, even if they don't think the same, they fear, because the internal culture is that's of a shaming, of kind of verbal bullying, making you feel like if you think a little bit different, so you're genocide deniers, and stuff like that. And this is the problem.
Agreed.
But when it comes to Amnesty, I mean, the Amnesty International, they said that they closed down the office not because there had anything to do with the genocide report. It was because of the Israeli office was racist towards Palestinians.
Okay. So first, no, they formally said it's both reasons. Mm-hmm. And I would add another reasons. There were many incidents where we promote the pro-human campaign started as a project within Amnesty Israel. So, for example, we issued 2 policy papers, one that deals with the dehumanizations of Gazans within the Israeli society, and one that deals with the dehumanizations of Israelis and Jews among some circles of the pro-Palestinian protest in the West.
Okay.
And they demand us to take down the second policy paper, and we refused. We said we are not against the protest as a whole. We think it's legitimate and even important. It played an important role in elevating issues to the public awareness about atrocities in Gaza, starvation. It was very important.
So there was no racism, you think?
Sorry?
So you're saying that there was no racism of Palestinians?
Yeah, I will get to this.
Okay.
But you know, in this protest, there were also things like ripping down posters of hostages, even children, calling to bomb Tel Aviv. It was all documented.
Okay.
And they just ignored it. They ignored that we say we strictly and we're pinpointing the problematic issues in the protest. We're not delegitimizing the protest as a whole. And they demand us to take it down. In terms of racism, I was, the deputy director. I don't think we ever experienced racism. We have even had one worker who was saying something that might be interpreted as racist against Palestinians. She was immediately called out, and we make a hearing, and she chose to just quit. So we dealt with it very strongly. Yeah. They would say, and there's some truth to it, that no Palestinian was, in the high-ranked management, there was no Palestinian. Yeah. There's some truth to it, but it means like either you get more budget to hire another person, or you just need to fire someone who do good job. So.
But I had a quarrel with ChatGPT on this, and I tried to find out what and it said that it repeatedly asked about what is the evidence of racism, and AI responded that there were many Palestinians who were part of the board who resigned, and they resigned over many years, and because of that, that was an evidence of.
I think Amnesty Israel also should be criticized of a problem of inclusivity. I wouldn't say it's clear-cut racism, but I would say that in a very sensitive context, you have to be very sensitive to different lived experiences, different angles. Sometimes people were they were very tense. We need to understand it was after October 7. If someone says something like, it's not terrorism, it's, liberty forces or something like that, so people may react over the top or not trying to debate.
So there was strong disagreement about the issue.
Yes, so the disagreement was not always, in a polite manner or in a tolerate.
Why did they quit?
Because they felt, I think, Palestinian citizens of Israel if they say something that would be critical of Israel, they would be cracked down. People are being arrested for incitement, where Jews would say something much worse and would not be arrested at all. There is a big problem in Israel in that sense. So they want the organization, the human rights organization, to be extra caring and embracing. And we failed sometimes on that. I don't think it's a clear-cut racism. It's not. It's being not sensitive enough.
Okay.
And then I like to move back to where I started in a way, because now we have had 2 years of war in Gaza. There is a huge catastrophe. We have a frail peace. We don't know if this will last at all. And if you talk about the security of Israel, how are you going to achieve that? In my opinion, as I said earlier, I think people have to respect each other on equal terms and talk together as human beings, and try to find a way to coexist and in a way that both parties can prosper. And that's not a naive, I think it's the only way to create a peaceful solutions. Otherwise, you will end up in a situation where new wars will come. They will escalate again. You may subdue people now, and then a new organization, which may be much worse than Hamas, probably will emerge. So I think we should maybe discuss a little bit what should be the way forward. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's one of the topics that we had on our agenda. And
then I think we should start talking about that now.
Yeah, okay, Finn. What's your take on it? What do you...
Should I answer?
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah. So first of all, the first thing is to acknowledge that the security concerns of Israelis is a worthy topic, is part of human rights, the right to life, okay? And then we need to understand, if you want to take it seriously, we need to understand really in depth the dynamics of warfare, the feedback loop that animate this conflict, and to see what are the forces at play. So I don't think any nation, whatever it is, has the right to choose a regime who want to eliminate the other party. You have a right to liberty, you don't have the right to destroy the other. So one thing to do is there is a Palestinian force, political force, who do acknowledge Israel's rights to exist, which is the Palestinian Authority. And I would inflict effective pressure on Israel to acknowledge the Palestinian Authority as a player that should play a role in post-Hamas Gaza, in post-war Gaza, to fill the void. If the void will not be filled, Hamas would just return and the cycle perpetuate.
Yeah. Danielle, what's the future of NGOs?
So we sort of seem to be talking like cross purposes a little bit. So I don't have a solution to the conflict, and I don't seek to weigh in. To me, that is my personal political view, and I've always been very careful about keeping my views out of my work. It's certainly not why I'm here. I have a view in the sense of my own, what I'm here for, which is to discuss human rights and humanitarian organizations. And again, I think the nature of the conversation just shows why I'm dedicated to beating this drum, because conversations wander off into this bigger macro picture of Israel, Gaza all the time. And I want to stress, I hope I'm making it clear, that my focus is on these organizations themselves. They are power brokers in our society. They are in our courtrooms, they are in our classrooms, they are in our boardrooms. They are very important institutions, and they do not get enough attention as to how they work. So my solution for that situation that I am specific about is that we need to collate the testimony and evidence of the people who are in these organizations now, since October the 7th and before. There is very few avenues of redress. If you really have a problem in these organizations and your manager doesn't want to deal with it, you have nowhere to go. So that is a huge problem. There needs to be oversight, and there needs to be external bodies that somehow hold these organizations to account. I hope human rights and humanitarian organizations would agree that's important, that they shouldn't be held to any different standard to anybody else.
So what would that, like an international ombudsperson
It's
for
a discussion.
NGOs? Or?
It's a discussion about the nature of it, but it's the philosophy, the basic principle is that it must exist. You cannot have unregulated organizations because they are prone to corruption. Yeah. I would also just say briefly, we need to make sure that these organizations are subject to some sort of standards, some sort of general principles of fact correction, of corrections of fact checking and things like that, so people know that there is some basic level of standards going on with what they're reading. At the moment,
you're not advocating that they should be like court-like institutions.
No, not at all. I'm just saying other
like procedures and everything.
Academia has certain basic standards that must be met. I suggest that human rights organizations join the family of industries and other professions and submit themselves to some basic regulation. They are not better or more godly than any other organization just because they deal with important moral issues. It does not make them more moral. We have dangerously conflated these two things.
Aren't they competent today? They have lots of lawyers and they have like people with a...
Yes, but they are not themselves subject to regulation as institutions.
Okay, yeah, fine.
Can I add a small point?
Please. Yes, please. And
so
then
I think the problem of credibility, if you don't have this credibility, if you are conceived of as part of the political game, and the political game is ever polarized, then the whole idea of human rights become a political stance. And now, for example, in the UK, in anti-immigration protests, you see people tearing the Palestinian flag. What does that has to do with, being anti-immigrants in the UK? It's become polarized. If we're talking about atrocities, so most of the political spectrum, if not all of the political spectrum, should be against it. It should be consensual.
But there has to be, just to clarify here, you're saying that, okay, there's a danger of politicization as opposed to legalization. Are these legal organizations, are they legal bodies, court-like institutions, or are they political? And they have to be somewhere in the middle.
They not just need to be, legal professional, they also need to be conceived of as such. So they need also to care about their public image as impartial entities.
Okay, yeah.
Which theme are we discussing now? Because I like the Fosse point to have end up with some positive future looking.
Yeah, there's been a lot of criticism towards humanitarian organizations and human rights organizations, and especially Danielle has been pointing them out. Yariv has also been pointing them out, and so I've given everybody a chance now. Erik was started with. Is there room for change? Is there room for betterment? In your opinion, do you think that there is any, and what do you think about Danielle's suggestion about oversight?
There's always room for change and betterment, and everybody does mistakes, and what I take away from what you're saying is that there has been too little room for internal debate in some organizations, which there should be, and there has to be self-criticism in all organizations. I can only speak for my own one, where of course, we are rigorously evaluated, monitored by our donors. We get funding from 25 different nations, including the United States of America, even under this government in America. We are getting from all over Europe, etc. If we had serious flaws, we would lose our funding immediately. We however,
sometimes afraid of losing that funding, because if you say the wrong things, then you... If you say the wrong things, are you then afraid of losing funding?
If we're seen as biased or not, our principles are neutrality, independence, and impartiality. If we violate that, it's over. And that's why we live live by that. But I also like to say, I think at this moment, which is where there is some hope now, there is a peace plan for Gaza. There is some hope to get in more aid. The people I spoke to in Gaza were very happy. There hadn't been much air raids or fighting of late, that this could be 0 point and we can move in the right direction. I give Yariv, the security of Israel has to be fundamental to all of that. And the outside world must understand the trauma that goes all the way back to the Holocaust and the early days of Israel, and the 7th of October has to understand Israel needs security guarantees. Israel needs to be recognized by all its neighbors. It was never by Hamas. It hasn't been by Iran. This is a problem. And then Israel needs to understand that occupying other people's land is wrong. I mean, it's wrong in Ukraine. It's wrong on the West Bank. And there has to be a reboot in people-to-people relations. The moment now, so I understand you quoted a survey saying that most people now believe that the people in Gaza are extremists, and they are Hamas and jihad.
They say no innocent in Gaza.
No innocent in Gaza.
Yeah.
A lot of Knesset members have also said that.
Right.
One quote from Knesset was, "The children of Gaza brought it upon themselves," and so on. But let that be. Let that be. In Gaza, of course, most people there now are not very fond of Hamas at all. That's when I speak to people. They have been really, they have suffered too much, really. They want one thing: peace, hope, future. Only through a peace process can that happen. But there is a lot of wounds now, trauma on both sides. And I believe that with the current Israeli government and with the split Palestinians between militants and an old regime in Ramallah that hasn't had elections for very many years, I think the outside world needs to be very firm in charting the way forward. In all of that, then the human rights organization and NGOs and so on should help in all of this, but it has to be led by the United States, the European Union, and the Gulf countries who have really put together. The party's leadership have not helped at all.
Yes, a short point. I think, although human rights organizations' role is not to promote peace, but they should certainly not need to be an obstacle for peace, or even they would need to facilitate the conditions that would enable peace, which is stopping human rights violations. But they don't work like that. And I will take distant example from Algeria. Back then, the president, Abdelaziz Bouteflika, was given amnesty to his soldiers and to Islamists who both made human rights violations, and was able to end a devastating civil war. And Human Rights Watch was criticizing him for violating the principle of accountability, because now they are not held accountable for the human rights violations. And this is the problem, because the sometimes very limited legal perspective, so focused on past violation, cannot see forward-looking the future to avoid future probable human rights violations or risks. And this is, I think, more pervasive than the current case.
Okay, we're coming to the end now. Erik, you raised the question, the future. Do you have an answer yourself?
No, as I said, I think the baseline for peace and prosperity for all these 16 million people living in the region is that they respect each other and support each other, that they have a common interest in rebuilding their societies. At the moment, that seems so far away, it's so polarized that it's extremely difficult to see how it can be done. But let's say there was an election in Palestine now, and if Hamas again got elected, how would...
It will be very probable, I think, because surveys have shown that they...
I'm not sure how probable it is, because it's difficult to penetrate the society. They had a lot of support 20 years ago.
Yeah, okay.
We don't know now, but it could be. And then how do you, in a way, you cannot select if you are two people. I mean, in Israel you have a government now that you can criticize it, but that's the government the people elected. And the same with Palestinians, they can elect who they want, and they're spokesmen that need actually to go to the table, whatever the situation. That's the way we are thinking in our society.
Short comment, because I have...
Yeah.
Very short. I want to see if there is one or two questions.
I think no nation has the right to elect a ruling force that want to eliminate the others. So I think Israel need to be, international pressure because it occupies Palestine, and if Palestinians vote for Hamas, they also need to face some restriction, and everywhere in the world, not only in this case.
Thank you. Okay, now we have time for maybe one or two questions, or maybe three.
We have more.
Do you think? Well, you're the boss.
We have till tomorrow morning at 8.
It has to finish at 8.
When is your flight?
Mine? That'll be good.
Okay.
So I'm going to start with a question.
Yeah.
Because I'm organizing this, so I get to start.
Okay, Louise, please.
So thank you very much. It's indeed a debate that went into many places. We didn't, because there's a lot of levels here. They're all the lived experiences. And when we talk about lived experiences, you mentioned Coos and Kaos, our organization. And we have felt, and many years ago, we started this organization back in 2016, not to do this type of work, more to strengthen Jewish identity. But we came to a place when we see that our narrative and our lived experience as Israelis, as Jews living in the diaspora with half of our people's brothers and sisters, 8 million of them live in Israel. We see how our perspective, our lived experience is not being portrayed in the media, in the humanitarian organizations being invited to the media to talk about what's going on in the region, how we're being squeezed to the side. And this is one of the reasons why we are doing also these debates, to really to get to the bottom, to be able to share our lived experience and our frights and our for the future. So you talked about earlier, I think there's this, yes, the Israeli government, for sure, it's going far right. But there's a reason why Netanyahu has been elected year after year, because for us who have experienced terrorism, I've been through terrorism in my university in 2002 in Jerusalem. All of you have passed by terrorism, lost friends to terrorism. For us, all this, it's the most important is our security. And on that builds this layers of narrative that is important for us. And then you have October 7th, which was just all of our biggest fears blowing up in our face. This was our biggest fears about Gazans, that you're going to breach the fence. And this is why we need to put up this wall. And this is why we need to implement this, because we're afraid that we're actually going to do it. And eventually they did it. So the question is, if you as humanitarian organizations are not putting all of the lived experience on the table, explaining why Israel is doing this, and why for us it's about our future. It's about that these countries will still exist tomorrow. Wouldn't it be better for the humanitarian organizations to actually put all of the cards on the table, look at the frights of the Israelis, look at the fears of the Palestinians, and then be able to come from that place to talk about, I don't think you're doing that enough. Isn't that something that could be implemented and changed better? I'd like to ask Danielle about that. Are you happy with that?
Yeah, I think again, I'm coming from a strictly methodological point of view. If you eliminate, I was in meetings after October the 7th, where it was called an Israel-Palestine meeting. Half the organization attended. The researcher from Gaza was allowed to speak. Other people spoke, and the word Israeli hostage or what happened in the kibbutzim was not mentioned once. This becomes an exercise in ideology once again, and I think this is why these organizations are part of the problem at this point and part of the dehumanization of Israelis that is going on worldwide. And this is why they must return to their mandates and restore the humanity of everyone, so that if, God forbid, the same kind of thing happens in Oslo, or the same kind of thing happens in Paris or London, you can rest assured that human rights organizations will fight for your humanity and not say it was because of the root causes of X or the structural this or the indigenous that humanity is humanity is humanity. And that also means reflecting the population group. It is apparent to me that an organization like Human Rights Watch does not think it fit to have a Jewish Israeli staff member on the ground. What does that mean? It means that you do not really consider their experience to be valid. This hasn't been an oversight for 6 months. It's been an oversight for over a decade. Yeah. So I'm saying there are structural issues to consider in order for them to regain their credibility as neutral observers and as true humanitarian and human rights practitioners.
Yeah, I'm going to give the mic to Michael.
I have first like a comment which struck me, that the Syrian rebels took over the whole country more or less in a week. It's 500 times bigger than Gaza. And Israel has been fighting Hamas for 2 years. Well, now we have a ceasefire, but for 2 years. So it struck me that anything that encourages Hamas will prolong the fight. So all the pro-Palestinian demonstrations, I don't agree with you, Yariv, because all the pro-Palestinian demonstrations encourage Hamas, and that prolongs the war in my eyes. Also, all the hostage demonstrations have also encouraged Hamas. They got exactly what they want, and it prolongs the war. And the neutrality of NGOs also encourages Hamas, because they are not condemned. So the neutrality actually is an encouragement. They can keep on with their method because they gain what they want. All along this way, Israel is condemned, the Israeli soldiers are monsters, and it plays into Hamas's narrative and their strategy. So all these things prolong the war in my eyes. And that's why I have a question to the NGOs in terms of neutrality. When you're sitting in your own room, I understand that neutrality has to be seen from the outside. But when you're sitting in your own room, are you neutral then? Or can you keep that? And also I have a question to Erik Fosse. Because you said that before 7th of October, there were like 2 hours of electricity. It was very difficult to live in Gaza. But how does that harmonize with all the tunnels being built and so on? And it reminds me about Iran, which has this big, or had maybe, a very big nuclear program, but they don't have water. So it comes down to priorities. And so I'm not sure about that. The perspective in Gaza is correct when we look at all the poverty and all the difficulties. There are other also components in that perspective. So if you have a comment on that.
I can comment on that.
it is no doubt that the main reason for the lack of power and the economic crisis in Gaza is due to the embargo, the closure of borders. It's virtually a prison, and it's been since 2006. There's no doubt about that. That doesn't, in a way, clean Haas. Hamas is they have full control of Gaza. They are controlling all parts of the society. They consider themselves a liberation movement, and they use actions that they believe are right for them. For me, as a doctor responsible and interested in civilian lives, of course, that's far beyond what I can support in a way. But that can, in a way, explain why that's how they explain the attack that they did. And as I said, the explanations, in my opinion, a government or an organization, they can give, and everybody will give a good explanation in their view for their actions. That doesn't liberate them from responsibility for these actions when they are attacking civilians or children, people that should be protected. But that goes for both parties. And you cannot even, in a way, blame demonstrations here and there, organizations. I mean, the responsibility for solving this problem and create peace and prosperity and safety for everybody are the people living in the region. It's not us. We can support them, we can try to relieve problems, we can try to give advice, and that goes both for the friends of Israel and the friends of the Palestinians. But the important thing must be a common respect for all parties involved, Israelis and Palestinians alike. Otherwise, I don't see how this will end in continuous animosity and new bloodbath.
I would also like to comment, because I don't think Hamas cared that much. It cares for a certain extent, but very little about demonstrations in the West or in Israel. It's not the thing that motivates this very extremist organization and very decisive. And I think that, warfare that is more in line with human rights law, not that it's totally okay, but for example, if we take the Iraqi military freeing Mosul from ISIS, so what they established is ability for the population to flee away from combat zone, which the Israeli military didn't apply in Gaza. And we see that in 8 months or so, 9 months, Mosul was freed from ISIS with much less cost for civilian population. Then again, Amnesty still criticized the Iraqi military for not doing enough.
Okay. I know that Jan has a meeting he has to go to, so he's becoming impatient. I want to thank the panel. I think this was an important debate. There were strong opinions, but it was a respectful debate, I think, from my perspective. So I want to thank you very much. I want to thank the audience. You were very nice. You were clapping. You were not doing. That was very nice. I want to say something. We have like 10 seconds.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you.
Thank you.